This is a radio interview with my father, late father, Rabbi Bernard Schwab. Was born in February 28th, 1932, which was a leap year, and he died January 21st, 1985, the young age of 52. Okay, here we go.
Calls for a homeland. But this week we're going to hear the other side. Rabbi Bernard Schwab of the Ohavi Zion Synagogue is a leader of the local Jewish community.
Britain put out a white paper in 1939 which said that there will be just a very limited amount of Jewish immigration into Palestine. It happened to come in the worst time in the world history for the Jewish people. Because at that time Hitler rose to power, and the Jews that could have escaped were not allowed to escape. One ship sunk right before the land was not allowed in there. And so it was a very terrible tragedy. And yet the Jews in Palestine that were there fought with the Allies. Ben-Gurion, who later became the first prime minister, said that we will fight the war as if there is no white paper, and we will fight the white paper as if there is no war. But there was a Jewish brigade that did very, very well during the Second World War. And as a matter of fact, when the war was over, there was a Protestant clergyman who wrote a book called The Forgotten Ally. Van Passen is his name, and he was a very strong Zionist, and he said just for what they did in the Second World War, where all the Arab nations virtually joined the Nazis, and the little group in Palestine valiantly fought for the right of the Allied cause.
So that takes us up to the creation of the State of Israel in 1947 by the United Nations. What factors led to this, the immediate factors? And I suppose what I have in mind is the tragedy during World War II.
Right. Well, the Holocaust, there were 6 million Jews killed. The Jews that were saved were about 500,000. They were in DP camps, and none of them wanted to go home to their neighbors who killed them and sold them out and killed their children and their wives and everyone that they knew. They had nowhere to go. They wanted to go to only one place, and that was, of course, to Palestine. Meanwhile, no nation wanted them. Ernest Bevin, who was the Labor Secretary of Britain, was not interested in them. He didn't want to let them into Palestine, and he told Harry Truman, if you want them, take them in the United States. And in fact, there was a movement to bring 100,000 of those DPs into the United States. But instead, Truman created, through the United Nations, an organization that would investigate the whole matter. They would talk with the DPs, they would talk with the Jews in Palestine and the Arabs in Palestine, and they came back with a report that said 100,000 Jews should immediately be allowed into Palestine, whether the Arabs like it or not. And but the British were not willing to give in, and as the Jews came to Palestine in boats, what they did, and some of them were a miracle that they even got across. But they were taken immediately to Cyprus until the Cyprus was so filled that Britain was already going to make an example and send the ship Exodus 1947, which was an old ship built around the First World War that was bought in Baltimore. They rammed the ship and they were going to send the ship back to Germany, but this already aroused the world. And meanwhile, the Haganah, which was a defense force of Israel, tried to sneak in many of these illegals into the country and bring them places already having identification papers for them and so on, and blowing up radio stations while they were doing it so they could not be tracked. And many of them did get it there illegally, but that method would not work because there were already too many of them, and the British were having a very hard time. So disgusted with it that they threw it into the lap of the United Nations, I think hoping that the United Nations would give it back to them and tell them they could do whatever they want to do. It's up to them. But it didn't happen that way. The partition plan was voted on at the United Nations. There were many countries that abstained, like England, and of course all the Arab countries were against it. But the United States and Russia, and that's the first thing the Russians did not vote against, was to allow the State of Israel to come into creation. And so this was a very great day. Well, and when this news came, people danced in the street in Palestine. They say Ben-Gurion was the only sad man because he knew that once the state came into being, there would be war and there would be thousands killed, which of course is exactly what happened.
You say that all the Arab states were opposed to the creation of Israel in 1947.
Yes.
Last week,
and threatened a religious war against them if it was created.
Last week, our Palestinian guest said that, in general, though that was true, and he freely admitted that,